to Stars and Gripes now, where we pick apart the absurdity, the hypocrisy and the blatant bias in the US media. First, one of America's most divisive TV hosts, who we have spoken about a lot on this show, has been sacked. Joy Reid's floundering show was axed, and in her last show, she spoke about resistance and fascism with the typical inflammatory language that she has become infamous for.
We begin tonight with what I think is the question. When you are in the midst of a crisis, and specifically a crisis of democracy, how do you resist? When fascism isn't just coming, it's already here. So what, if anything, can you do about it? Well, for one thing, you can try to learn from history, from what people in this situation in countries around the world and in America have done before.
Reid considered herself to be a student of history, so much so that she spent a great deal of time using awful people from history to describe her modern-day political opponents.
Vladimir Putin's Russia, Viktor Orban's Hungary, or Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela today, that suppresses the rights of women and minorities, uses the military to execute the whims of a strongman dictator, and controls and suppresses the press, education, the arts, rewrites history to suit a favored and dominant racial class, and foments extravagant corruption in order to enrich the dictator and his friends.
It really is extraordinary that Reid lasted this long. She did not appear to have any principles as a journalist. Her entire personality seemed to be personal attacks on people who voted differently to her. She even managed to turn this Thanksgiving into a message of division.
You right-wingers shouldn't have to suffer the consequences of your votes? You don't want to be around me because I voted for fascism. No fair. I'm coughing on you with COVID, but you want me to wear a mask for your safety? No fair. My body, my choice. Well, here's an alternative thought. Make your own dinner, MAGA. Make your own sandwiches. Wipe your own tears. Troll amongst yourselves with Elon and leave us alone.
This is a person who is getting paid $3 million a year, although that was slashed to $1.5 million last year following a ratings disaster. But now the gravy train has run out of track. And that woman who wanted families to fight on Thanksgiving about politics and who calls anyone who disagrees with her Hitler, she believes that she is the victim.
My show had value, and that, I'm sorry, that what I was doing had value. And in the end, I'm sorry, I try not to cry on TV. And this is kind of like me on TV, so I apologize.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that's misinformation. Her show did not have value, which is why the company axed it. It's pretty simple, but this fact was also lost on her colleagues. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow was infuriated that her friend Joy Reid was sacked.
In all of the jobs I have had, in all of the years I have been alive, there is no colleague for whom I have had more affection and more respect than Joy Reid. I love everything about her. I have learned so much from her. I have so much more to learn from her. I do not want to lose her as a colleague here at MSNBC, and personally, I think it is a bad mistake to let her walk out the door.
Okay, they didn't let her walk out the door. She was fired. I mean, surely Rachel knows this. I mean, this is the level of spin and duplicity that these people go to air with. They cannot even be honest about the fact that her ratings were bad, so she was fired. Instead, they dress it up as, oh, they let her walk out the door, whatever that means. It is extraordinary, really, that management let this go to air, and it just gets worse. After this, Maddow implied that management fired her because they are racist.
It is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible, and I do not defend it.
Okay. If that is true, and this is an indefensible racist decision, then resign. Surely you do not want to work for a racist institution, and you, a white privileged woman, is taking up the spot of a woman of colour, so surely she resigns, right?
think I'm safe in saying for all of us anchors who you know through the TV, please know that what pains us the most is not what happens to us. It is what happens to our coworkers on whom we depend and who you don't necessarily know, but we respect and love them and depend on them. And did I mention we respect them?
Okay, so she is staying, but she respects all of her colleagues who just got sacked, and she will continue to earn $25 million over 5 years. Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Garter to discuss. Now, Kosha, I've got to say, good on MSNBC for letting that go to air. I'm really glad that I got to kind of witness this meltdown in real time. And to their credit, they gave her a bit of independence and they let her call them racist on their own TV channel.
They were definitely generous, Jack. Great to be with you as always, both in letting Joy Reid have her final episode. Oftentimes hosts are canceled and are not afforded that courtesy because you do serve at the pleasure of management and the company that employs you. And also Rachel Maddow over here. But I have to say that the level of sanctimony and insubordination that she showed in that, she was dripping with insubordination, was actually really, really stunning, where she basically, as you said, accused her bosses of making a bad management decision and being racist. I think this is a real test for new management. They've got Rebecca Cutler, a newly minted president of the network after the previous one, Rashida Jones, resigned in January. And I don't know, I think it's a really interesting test for her to show who is ultimately in charge over here, notwithstanding Rachel Maddow is their biggest star. It hasn't happened yet, so I don't expect that it will. But I think in most other workplaces, this would be considered rather brazen for an employee to publicly say this about their boss.
Oh, definitely brazen. I think there is also a little bit of an issue in the logic that she's using. If representation based on racial lines really matters, it's always these white liberals in these top positions that say it. You never see them stand aside and say, okay, well, Joy Reid can have my job then. She can have my show.
There are 25 million reasons I can think of for why she's not doing that, even after her pay cut. That's a very pretty package for 1 hour of content a week. After the first 100 days of the presidency, she literally does 1 hour per week. So most people will never have a deal like that. But ultimately, as you said at the top, this does come down to a business decision because the product that Joy Reid was putting out there has been what it's been, and MSNBC had no problems keeping it on when she was at least bringing ratings. You could argue if that ethically or morally that was the right thing to do or not, but from a business perspective, she used to get about 3 million people a night back in 2020. That dropped to about 1.1 to 1.2 in 24 last year, and now she's not even cracking 800,000. So when you just look at those numbers, ultimately, with new management in place, the whole network is being spun off from the parent company, Comcast, so they're going to have to stand on their own 2 feet economically. It just it was no longer sustainable for them, and she had to go.
Yeah, it was clearly about the numbers, but these people have to make everything about race. Anyway, let's move on now to the world of newspapers. There is a war going on between Amazon owner Jeff Bezos and his own staff at the Washington Post. The Washington Post staffers outrage at Jeff Bezos' stunning plan for opinion pages that prompted top editor to quit. So, what on earth are these people upset about? Well, as is his right, Bezos has changed up the editorial direction of the paper. He took to X earlier this week to write, "We are going to be writing every day in support and defence of 2 pillars, personal liberties and free markets." We'll cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. Kosha, this is quite common in newspapers, and there may be some people watching us who disagree that a newspaper can take a stance, but it's quite normal for various papers to take on these pillars of advocacy for their constituents and their readers. That's why you have editorials, etc. I think what's happened is the Washington Post has right now been run by the loonies, so to speak, and this is the first time that he's really putting his thumb down and saying, no, I've got a different vision for this paper and we're going to play it my way. It's extraordinary that it's led to resignations.
Indeed, I think they're just not used to real leadership from management, and yes, including management taking a look at the editorial side and the product. So, of course, journalism is a different type of product than, say, a widget that you would sell on a shelf, and there is some truth to that. So they believe that they're sacred and management shouldn't step over that line too much. But at the end of the day, it is a product, it is a business. Jeff Bezos paid $250 million to acquire the Washington Post. It's losing $100 million a year, and that's trending only worse and worse. So now, in this era and just all the structural changes that are happening in media, where they have so much more competition, and newspapers in particular are structurally very, very challenged in terms of eyeballs and reach relative to digital and television and everything else, he's taking a look at this. And one thing is the product strategy, good old-fashioned product strategy, just as he would have done at Amazon and has done at Amazon and other products and companies that he leads. He's doing the same over here. He's identifying that those two pillars might be a gap or an opportunity in the market. And it is going to lead to a lot of churn, I think, of people who are there now who do not agree with those pillars. They want the pillars to be other things, maybe anti-Trumpism or something else, and you will see some churn, but it's also an opportunity for new people to come in and start lifting and pivoting the strategy of what the Washington Post stands for.
Yeah, well said. Well, let's move on now, because CNN's Jake Tapper, he's one of those prominent journalists who continuously lied to people about Joe Biden's health. Now, Biden was clearly deteriorating before our eyes, and in my opinion, the establishment media's attempts to ignore this fact made a lot of moderates really lose faith in it. Now, here's a reminder of the spin that Tapper would use to protect his mate Biden.
I think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You are
to
no
watch somebody on stage
that's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter.
Idea.
CNN finally started telling the truth on this after the disastrous debate which ended Biden's political career, but they ignored the reality of his cognitive issues for years. Now, we all know this, but Tapper thinks that we are all stupid. He's written a book, and it is about Biden's self-delusion in wanting to run again and the cover-up of his health decline. The gall of these people. Kosher, for him, who was one of the most prominent people covering up the cognitive decline issue, to write a book about it, about the cover-up, is there anything that's just crazier than that?
Also very brazen. The book is going to be titled The Original Sin, coming out on May 20th. And I think he is papering over his original sin as one of the biggest cover-uppers of that decline that now history is going to continue to judge very unkindly in terms of the media's role in that cover-up. And I think what he's doing is playing to that still present cohort in the market of low news media consumers, low information consumers, who actually don't follow this stuff day in and day out the way we do. And their first exposure to the level of cognitive decline that was taking place with Joe Biden was that infamous debate against Donald Trump. And he literally had front row seats to it because he was the moderator of that debate. So I'm guessing that's who he's targeting, that cohort of people who honestly didn't know about it until that point in time. We shall see what the book sales look like. That might give us a clue about that. But over the span of history, as people go into this and look into this, I don't think this is going to work well for him, and it will damage his credibility that he's pretending to be against the very thing that he's writing about in this book, and we do all see it.
Yeah, you make a good point about sales, though. I mean, I'm certainly going to have to buy it now, and maybe that's all part of the strategy. But Kosher Gada, thank you so much for your time and your insights.